Hello.
I know.
Hello, Rachel. So we can get started now. So, hey everyone. Welcome to the session on intro to open source. Today here with us we have Mishal Shah, who is currently working as a web solutions engineer at Google. Mishal also has a vast experience and interest in open source. So he has been a part of the GSOC in 2019 as a student and as a mentor with GSOC in 2020. He's worked on the NS3 App Store and GSOC as a part of his mentorship in GSOC and studentship as well. Yeah, Michelle, you can take over the stage.
Sure. Thanks, Amit. So, hi everyone. I'm Mishal. Navneet already introduced me. Uh, Today, let's go over some of the open source concepts and what exactly is open source, and try to understand and what would be the motivation to contribute to open source. So, before we go ahead, I'm pretty sure most of you would have seen some of this logos or know what it is. Like one of them is a web framework for the backend. One of them is a database. One of them is a web management, content management system, a library, etc. What is one common theme between all of them? Uh, yeah, all of them are software. That is one, but all of them are actually open source software. Uh, yeah, and all of this software or libraries actually are used by many big companies and all around the world for a lot of software engineering work. A lot of things are being powered by that. So that's kind of like the power of open source. That a library like Curl, uh, which has been used by a lot of people, is actually an open source software. So you can actually go and get its code online, and the same for even Django. I think Django is like a lot of companies use Django, like Instagram, etc. MySQL is kind of like the de facto database management system and things like that. And React, one of them. I think a lot of websites are being made on React. So yeah, this all softwares are open source. That is like the common theme. And if all the softwares excite you, open source will surely excite you. So that is kind of things that we'll be going over. Yeah, I know it's the Hacktober season. The October is the Hacktober season, so a lot of motivation comes to contribute to open source from Hacktober. But here, not going into more details of Hacktober. Instead, we'll be focusing more on the open source part of it. I think Hacktober is a great concept to actually get people on board with open source. So, good starting point. Okay, but we'll talk more about open source here. Yeah. Uh, Today, what all will be cover more about open source, a small intro and things here and there. What is it that you can do? Uh, from my experience, what are the key takeaways that I have? And at the end, we'll cover with some Q&A. So that is kind of like the agenda. So what is open source? I think in very simple terms, any project whose code is freely available is kind of like an open source software. Yeah, the right side meme you would have seen multiple times, that a lot of the modern infrastructure, a lot of the modern software that is there is actually being powered by a lot of open source software. As simple as even Python is an open source language. So, and all of us know how widely Python is used. Uh, I think this meme is also very relatable with the log4j vulnerability, if you folks remember. So there was some vulnerability in a logging library in Java. Uh, like basically anyone could execute remote code. Remote code execution was possible with that, and that is like a vulnerability. And a lot of companies actually use log4j, and many big companies had kind of like a P0 kind of thing to fix that. Basically, once that was fixed in the open source, fix it in your builds. Otherwise, there will be more issues that would have been there. So yeah, open source, very small log4j library, like a logging library. A lot of people use it, and still it actually empowers a lot of the modern infrastructure or the modern software that is there. Yeah, and usually open source contributions or open source software is maintained for free. Uh, there's no direct motivate, there's no direct monetary gain or direct benefit, but a lot of indirect benefits will come over them, come over to it in the next part of the presentation. So that is kind of like the things. Okay. Yeah, what are the benefits of using open source software, and why not use something which is paid? So multiple things. First, you don't have any third-party dependency, so your cost is less. A simple example, let's say if you are using MySQL, uh, it's basically free, so you could host it in your own way and use it however you want, and you'll only be charged for the server. Uh, Whereas, let's say if you choose to use, let's say, Spanner from Google or the DynamoDB from Amazon, etc., to store your things, then there's a lot of cost associated with it. Like they probably charge for the number of data you store, like in KBs, etc. So there the cost would be even for the software and even for the engineers who are maintaining it, etc., etc. Whereas if you are using directly an open source software, you don't have any dependency with any company or something, and you can use it in your own way. Yeah, and the charge will be much lesser. So in general, let's say if you are building your own company, if you are doing anything, prefer using open source instead of using something which has a yeah, which is like available as a cost to it. And in general, there's a lot of lock-in. So let's say if you have decided to use, let's say, Amazon ka DynamoDB, then you are locked in with using that particular software only. And let's say if you want to move out and you do your own self-hosting later or move to a different company, then there's a lot of charge associated. Like, let's say you have like 5 TB of data and you have to move that data without any downtime. It's a huge headache, and like, won't say near impossible, but yeah, it's near impossible to migrate without any downtime, and yeah, things like that. So in general, there's a lot of lock-in. So in general, for anything that you are using, try to use open source, and you don't know if the company will stay, etc. Whereas if it's an open source software, you know that the code is there, so even if the company is down, like if no one is maintaining it, you yourself can maintain it. And that's kind of like the it. Yeah, so that's why the code is modified, you can do it. And in general, open source has been seeing great community. Let's say if the maintainers who are maintaining the software currently go away, new maintainers will come in. So in general, there's a very good community of open source software. So 100% go on using open source. Yeah, that kind of like sets the motivation that yeah, should you be using open source. But oh yeah, that is there. But what exactly is it, like who will empower open source, who will build it? So that's what will come in. uh, let's take a look at what open source in general in India is. So in India, there are very less open source software. Like any of the famous software that you see for Redis, so like let's say MySQL or even the ones that were there, none of them are from India. Most of them are from outside. So in general, India lags in the open source software world, like in general open source software. And with the Hacktober Fest or with in general anything, we should strive to like improve it. And even the contributors are there to the open source software, they're very less from India. So that also needs kind of like to be fixed. And to empower all the things we talked about before, we need this to be improved. Uh, Great, whatever you said, Mishal, is fine, but what is it that I can do to actually do? Start contributing to open source, or how do I actually contribute? So in general, uh, you need to know version management, like version control systems. That's where Git and GitHub comes into the picture. Git is the version control system. GitHub is kind of like the software which is empowering all hosting of software, etc., and to effectively use. There are more softwares like GitLab, Bitbucket, lot many others. But in general, Git and GitHub is kind of like lot more used than anything else. So learn this. This is kind of like the basic thing. Then learn any one programming language or framework. anything, be it like Python, C, C++, even Go, any new framework which you find very interesting, you could go about learning that. And then you can either contribute to any open source project, like any existing ones that you want, or you can even create. And that creation, like the creation of a new software project should not be like as complicated as, oh, what should I be creating? Even as simple as your assignments in college or whatever you're doing, even in your free time, you could like host them on open source, and you'll see a lot more people using it, lot more people actually getting value out of it, and some even contributing to it back. Like let's say you have added 3 algorithms and one of them is missing, you'll see someone contributing it back also. So yeah, that's how open source will start. And it does not necessarily need to be a project as such. It can even be a simple code which is there and eventually expanded. So that is one part of creating, and eventually maybe go and create very good software. So yeah, that is there. And contribute. So in general, it's very easy sitting here for me to tell that, yeah, go and contribute to any open source software, but it is not as easy as it sounds, and it's okay. Take your time. You need a lot of patience. You need time for it to actually spend time on it and understand where the things are going. And it won't come directly as easy, because the code we write in college or in general when we write on our own, we write pretty simple code with not much of the software engineering concepts or the design patterns, etc. But a lot of open source software that you see will actually build very nicely in that particular way, that they're following good design patterns, etc. So don't get disheartened. Instead, take it as an opportunity to learn those design patterns, etc., and go ahead and contribute. And it will take time, but I think the soft in general, there's a lot of documentation and all these days, so you can actually go ahead and find it out. Any one programming language or framework, as I said, you'll find software or basically a project in any language. There's nothing like, oh, there's more in this, more in that. There's always something or the other that you'll find. So anyone is fine, and then go ahead and contribute. Don't give up. Specifically saying it because the software, the code that we write in general in college or etc. is pretty naive, whereas the open source software has things very like little more involved, and I would say it follows much more better software engineering principles. And yet, the end, our goal is to be better software engineers or better computer science engineers. So we have to take that as an opportunity and go ahead with that. So yeah, that is kind of like thing. There are a lot more direct things available, like first good first issues. Then you have some up for grabs, etc. Websites which actually tells you that, yeah, this is a very good first issue. So it's like more simpler issue. So find such kind of issues, get a hang of it, uh, try to run. So in general, a strategy that I used to follow when I was in college contributing to open source, I would use like basically download that software and use it. When I use a software, I know what that software is for. I know what is the purpose of that software. And when I know, I kind of like follow it more easily, because let's say I know that on clicking this button this thing happens. So I kind of like try to follow that path, that, oh, I click this and this is the call stack that is happening of it. That is kind of like the easiest way to get started. uh, and let's say if you go in that particular way, I understood what is it that I can contribute. Okay, they don't have validators. Like let's say if it's a input box and I'm just typing integers, does it handle corner cases like uh, sorry, it's only text. Does it handle corner cases like integers should not be there, alphanumeric characters, special characters should not be there? Does it have those validations? So those kind of things are simple things when you can start thinking about contributing. And once you follow that call stack, it will be easier. So that's kind of like the tip one. Yeah, go ahead and use the software and follow the call stack and eventually start contributing. Yeah, that is one. A lot of people have asked me, like, is code the only way to contribute? No, you can contribute in other ways as well, like basically contributing documentation. And documentation does not mean fixing spelling mistakes, etc. Let's say you used a software, you tried running it on your system, whereas the steps mentioned are only for, let's say, Linux and Mac OS, and you are setting it on Windows, and you saw that the steps don't actually match what is there, and you had to do some more work or had to do some research before actually doing it. Then you can contribute the documentation so that anyone else who is actually going to uh, use the software on Windows will know how to set it up, and that is a great contribution actually. So yeah, code is not the only way. Contribute the like this. Let's say you started using the software and you found some bugs in it, raise bugs, or you can even request for feature request. Like if it's a small, they might ask you to do it on your own, or they might put it in their backlog and eventually pick it up. So yeah, all of this are actually counted as a contribution, and once you start doing it more frequently, you will start getting a hang of even the code, and yeah, eventually you'll get used to it. So like let's say you raised a bug, and someone raised a pull request to fix it. You see where all they have changed, what all they have changed, and you try to follow it, and maybe you'll get hang of the code. So yeah, no need to like immediately start with code. These are some other ways also to contribute. uh yeah, so people might have questions like, why do I contribute to open source? Is there any benefit to me in life? And we humans are made that way, that we always want some benefit out of it, and that is no, completely fine, nothing wrong there. So yeah, some of the benefits are basically you learn skills. Skills does not just mean technical, even soft skills. How do you write good commit messages? Good. How do you write good issues? Like let's say you raised a bug. How do you write those good? How do you interact with those people, etc. And that is like a great skill to have, and it will help you in long term. And obviously the technical skills, not to forget. You once you start going over the design patterns, you'll actually start adapting more of that. You can learn more of this, etc. So very good skill, and it will help you long in your career. So much helpful. Public work. So since a lot of things are public, a lot of people will know what that you have done this. A lot of people will reach out to you. I know a lot of people who have been reached out just because of their open source contribution directly for jobs. Like they don't directly offer jobs, it's always interview, but even getting a call for interview, a lot of startup founders and all find you through GitHub and all, and they actually reach out that, hey, we if you can contribute to our piece, like as a job, as such. So when it's public work, a lot of people are actually seeing it. uh, Take it like a YouTube video. A lot of people get famous by making YouTube videos and all. Why? Because that's public work. Similarly, the more you contribute to the code, basically, the more you contribute to open source, more people or the relevant people will actually notice it, and you'll eventually get rewarded. So it's a long term game, but yeah, a lot of things. A lot of people have reached out even to me to like for jobs, etc. And that is like very like common thing, nothing to be like proud of or nothing to be like shy of. That's how the nature of thing is. People want good software engineers, and when they see that you have been doing such kind of things, they will reach out to you. So that is kind of like the baseline. Yeah, you learn good quality code. uh, when you get like, I have been through some issues where like some pull request where I've gotten like more than 30-40 comments to fix them, etc. So, and take it positively with constructively, and it will actually help you learn good quality, and you eventually learn. No one is born smart, or no one knows to code better as soon as they're born, but it's an eventual process, and that's what you learn. You'll help the software community, and you'll eventually help the companies, as you saw Django, Curl, etc., MySQL, SQL, and all. Uh, lot of the software that are used by a lot of companies will actually help the community in general. Uh, you'll build your own resume by contributing. I When I was in college, my biggest doubt was I don't have an or my biggest dilemma was I don't have an idea to build on. And I'm pretty sure everyone would have the same. And at the end, we just end up building a to do app. So, uh, if you don't have ideas and if you're looking for ideas, go ahead and contribute. That's much more valuable than building a small to do app or something like that. So it will help you build your resume. You can actually mention that you contributed to this open source software, this particular feature or this particular bug fix, and that's much more valuable because people know that you have navigated through complex codes, you know how the systems work, you know software engineering. And yeah, obviously the career advantage is at the end you might get a good job uh, because of your open source contributor contributions. You can eventually be acquired by a business, or you can start your own business. WordPress that we see is a much bigger business right now. Even Curl, the software that I mentioned, so is maintained by one of individual contributor, like one of the developers, supported by a lot more. And that person has been acquired. Basically, that project has been acquired by a big company, and he's being paid just to maintain Curl. So that is there. Even React, Meta, Facebook has actually like it's a project from Facebook, and React is an open source software. People, a lot of engineers at Meta or Facebook are paid to just maintain React. So there are n number of such examples that people, your software will eventually be acquired, even if it's open source, uh, and people will actually use them. So yeah, because why, like that's a different topic on why do they acquire and all. Understand it as a business only, because not everyone knows how to use the software, and they need help in debugging, they need help in setting up. So companies try to get money out of it, and that's how they also get benefit. And some do it even for just the soft to contribute back to the open source community. So yeah, a lot of benefits, much more I can think of right now, but it's okay. Like on a high level, these are kind of like the benefits and why you should be contributing. My key takeaways from open source, we'll just talk about it. What all I learned doing open source and what evolved for me. One, when I was basically a student, I had very less confidence that God, this is a very big project. I am not able to understand what is happening. But once I started doing, I got the confidence that I can build it alone. It's because usually something that you do on your own and not much of a pair programming thing. So I got that confidence that yeah, I can build it alone. Once I did one contribution, and that eventually progressed. And that confidence is very, very needed to go ahead in the software world. And yeah, I also got the confidence to navigate complex codes. Usually, like when I started, I used to get very scared, like, oh, how is it all working? I go to a class and there's no implementation. Where is it getting implemented? It's actually in a implementation class. Basically, they follow the abstract class concepts and all. It sounds very simple right now, but when you are starting, it is actually very tough. And don't be worried about that. So you'll actually get a hang of it. And in general, when you are doing it alone, you self figure out things like, oh, this is how you do, this is how you do. So yeah, I think has helped me very much over my career, that once you start doing, you get that confidence. So that is one. Understanding build systems. So usually all the open source software that you see will not be built by just one system, like how we do, like let's say if you're doing C++ or C, GCC 1-o 1.c, like we do something simple like that, but they follow much more proper and elegant build systems. And not just one, they have multiple such, they have a linter, they have lot more things, they have tests running to check, etc. And then actually the build running, and a lot of services also build here and there. So yeah, it's very good to learn about them, because eventually when you enter the career, when you start doing your job and all, you'll get to, these things will come in, and when you have done this back, it will actually help you a lot. So I actually understood a lot of how all these languages and all coupled. I usually thought that a software is built by only one language, but multiple languages can be used. So even that was a good eye opener and good to see how they are using all of this together. And certain nuances, like why do they do it in certain way, why not this way. You learn about some of the security attacks, like if I write the code in this particular way, there could be SQL injection if I don't do it this way. So do it this way. Why do I prefer this? Why not this, etc. So such kind of things you'll eventually get used to more and more as you read, and that will actually help you. Again, I'm repeating the same thing, but it will actually help you a lot in your career. Lot more importance of open source. If back then someone would have asked me why am I doing open source, my sole aim was that I want to get into Google Summer of Code. I think that was my thing. But eventually I understood, and eventually things got in. So that is there. Open source communities, there are a lot many good communities out of for open source, and they actually help you a lot in many ways, getting a job, uh, getting used to software, etc. You learn a lot of professionalism, how to interact with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, etc. And you learn the professional way of communicating, etc. Networking, obviously, because you are communicating with developers all around the world, you'll actually learn a lot of networking. Uh, when I contributed or when I made one of the projects open source, I was talking to some person from the US on mail, and that was very nice. That was kind of like my first project, and very good conversations we had about, in general, the software world. And yeah, cultural differences. Uh, so yeah, you learn about cultural differences, cultural differences, how people work, how people talk, etc. Small part of it, but I think it's important for us to grow in life. So yeah, yeah, that is about it. Looking back, what could have been better? uh, Something that I kind of like regret or I still want to do is that want to become a long time contributor or maintainer for any open source project, maybe mine, maybe someone else. So that is obviously something on top of my mind right now also. And I don't have any big open source projects self built. I have a few, have like small projects here and there which are actually quite used, I can see on the GitHub based on the activity. But I kind of like want to build something big, like let's say Redis or MySQL, etc. So that is kind of like on top of my head also. So this I think could be better. And with this, I think I want to urge that start small, but eventually hope that you also kind of like get into something like this big, etc. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Uh, if you want, you can connect with me on, yeah, this is my website, and uh, time for questions if you have any questions for me. Hi, Navneet, are there any questions?
Yes, so there are a couple of questions.
Okay.
So one question is, so can I contribute to a project or a repository without knowing the entire code base?
Yeah, completely. I think very valid question. So usually all the open source projects that you'll see, or in general software that you'll see, will be very nicely divided into modules, etc. So usually your particular piece of code might only be affecting one of the modules, or initially when you are starting, at least for good first issues, etc., it will be very focused towards one module or one particular file or etc. So you don't need to know the entire thing. And as I said previously, try to follow this pattern, try to use that software, see what you want to change, and see only which particular module is getting invoked, etc., in your like line of code or in your call stack. So no need to know everything, and I would say it's impossible. Like I know a lot of opens like maintainers who have been maintainers for some time, but they don't know the pieces of code in other modules. They only know their module which they have contributed. That is completely all right. So no need to worry about the entire project, and I don't think you can know the entire project if it's a big one any day. Yeah.
And next question is, So, what are the security risks involved with open source projects because the code base is openly available?
There could be a lot of security risk, but I think the good part is it's a open source community. So let's say if they know that something is wrong, uh, people will actually volunteer to fix it. So that is like the good part. And these days the softwares have increased a lot. Like there are checks for if there are any security risk in your project, etc. Then they'll automatically be flagged. At least the basic ones will be flagged. So yeah, and I don't think as we are starting, we should worry much about the security risks. Uh, Eventually, everything will settle down. So, and as I said, a lot of people volunteer to do such kind of contributions. So, if there's any security risk, you'll eventually be fixed.
Right? What is the exact difference between open source software and free software?
Good point. So basically, open source like good question actually. Open source software, let's say WordPress. Okay, WordPress is actually open source. The code is freely available. It's a free software. So the software is open source, but to use WordPress, there's a cost associated. There's a hosting cost, etc. So and there's a cost even for maintenance, etc. Like basically, let's say if there's someone supporting you, etc. There's a minute difference that all open source software is free software, but uh, yeah, not all free software is open source. For example, uh, something that you use, Google search that you use, is a free software, not exactly free, but let's assume it's free. They don't have ads, etc. But the code is not open source. So that is kind of like the difference.
One more question. So, what are some issues related to depending on open source framework? So, let's say there's a company which depends on some open source framework, and what are the issues on, like, let's say, dependencies or version control that occurs?
Uh, Issues related to version control?
Like, since it's an open source, uh, so what I can understand from this question, so since there is a company which is depending on some open source framework, let's say Rails or something like that. Now, with each version of Rails, like 5, 6, or 7, any issues regarding that, like what all can happen due to depending on Rails when every new version is released, support for older versions, support for libraries. That is what I think the question.
You got it. So I think I've not gotten the question exactly, but in general, I would prefer directly using open source software rather than going to a company who is actually using that open source software or to actually charge you, because open source software is usually managed well and you can actually use the versions, etc., directly from that. So that is one. uh, are there any risks with using, like, even if you go that route that a company is using open source software, is there a risk? There is a risk that, let's say, if the company shuts down or they stop maintaining the project and you are stuck at some Rails, let's say 5 version or something, and releases keep coming in, so there's obviously a risk. So it's always better to kind of like depend directly on open source and not go the route through a corporate. So that is the thing.
All right. Uh, okay, there's a question about GSOC if you would like to take that.
Sure.
So, how to select the right project to work on for GSOC?
Yeah, selecting right project is just take it based on your interest, I would say. There's no right or wrong as such. Any software that is open source is somewhere or the other used. So I don't know what your definition of right is. If it is more about if it's
Michelle, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we're back. We can continue. So, um, where did we last get cut? I'm really sorry.
I think we last asked about how to choose a project for GSOC.
Yeah, right. Okay, now that is done. So, how can you approach collaboration with developers while contributing to open source?
Yeah, so usually contributing to open source, if you're asking about, let's say, someone already as a maintainer and all, it's usually expected that you do it on your own and not as a collaboration with someone. Since it's everyone's doing it on their free time and more of like a hobby project kind of thing. So most of them do it on their own, and I have not seen much of like mentorship etc. happening in the open source world, like directly from a maintainer of the project. Otherwise, yes. So in general, do it on your own. I think that's kind of like the thing.
All right. I think we can take a one last question. So, uh, what if in future some companies make their source services paid? Then what happens to our data and our contribution?
Uh, that's a good question, which even I don't know what will happen actually. But in general, they are like committed to make it open source. So a lot of companies do, what do they do is, uh, whatever they have open source till date, they will keep it open source, and they'll keep developing more features as a paid or closed software in their company, which is paid. So, and those free software would usually be helpful for you to do whatever you want, etc. Uh, so mostly you'll be good that way. Uh, but yeah, we don't know what a company will do, and that's why most of the open source software that you see is actually maintained by people on their own and not by a company directly. Or usually what companies, and there's also an ethics angle that a company is involved with. So a lot of companies don't do this, and even if they do, they'll do it more in the form of support, that they'll provide paid support etc. if you want to purchase a paid, but the code will still be open source. So that's what companies follow. So no need to worry much about that.
All right. And Michelle, one last question from my side.
Sure, sure.
So, I noticed that you have a paper on DPDK.
Yeah.
And from what I know, DPDK is actually a very complicated topic in itself. So, any
Mm.
experience or anything you would like to share about your time working on it?
So yeah, DPDK was like part of our like major project in the final year. Like we developed a library on top of DPDK, which will help us measure power. Now, DPDK is very vast concept, and in general requires a lot of expertise. But I think coming back to the previous question, where do I need to know the whole software? I did not know DPDK entirely, but only the parts that were useful for like me or our team for our work. So yeah, just focus on what you need. Try to navigate those parts only, and then do it. And since it was a major project, actually more than a major project, because we started from our third year, even semester from third year we started doing, and did it till the end of fourth year, like the final year. And our final year also got extended due to COVID etc. So we kind of like spent around 1 year and 8 months on it, so we took quite some time. Yeah, it requires a lot of patience, requires time, involvement, etc. So it is complex, but since it's humans who have written it, there will be parts to navigate it. So give it your time, and you'll eventually figure out. I think that's what I'd say. But in general, I got more hang of it by using the software. So we directly used it by actually connecting NICs of two computers directly through wire, starting a package in from one system and sending data from one system or the other, and that's how things started. Then we noticed errors, then we saw where exactly it is coming from, then we followed the path and all. So yeah, I think that is kind of like the thing that we followed. So yeah, I don't know if you're looking for something else, but yeah, that's what we followed.
Okay, Michelle, I don't see any further questions, so just give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so all the streamers, the session is officially over. Okay.
Cool. Bye bye.